Many people view the United States as a police state, but what's interesting about this is that the United States didn't start enforcing their laws through police until the late 1800s, and the mass incarceration that we see today did not start until roughly around the 1970s. Majority of these arrests came from minority populations, specifically African Americans, and they are largely due to two main factors, that being the war on drugs and the tough on crime policies. Really fast, looking at our graph over here on the right, we can see the majority of our prison population lies in state prisons for committing violent crimes. But what's the most concerning to me is the fact that half that number, 443,000 people, are in local jails for crimes that they have not been tried on yet. Prior to the 1960s, in the 35 years prior, we added 52,249 Americans to the prison system. This is 30 times less the number added in the 35 years prior to 1960. In those 35 years prior, we added over a million people into the prison system. The biggest issue with this mass incarceration has to be the racial disparities that we see. As you can see on the graph on the left, the whites in America represented 64% of the population, but only 39% of our prison and jail population, while blacks represented 13% of the US population and overwhelmingly 39% of our prison population. Whites are the only group that have a larger number or larger percentage of people in the US population than they did in the prison population. As we can see on the right, more people were incarcerated from 1970 to 2010 in the United States than any other country in the world. African American men are incarcerated at 6.5 times the rate of whites and 2.5 times the rate of Latinos in the United States. Some factors besides the war on drugs and tough on crime policies that led to this is the overcriminalization of regular behaviors, things like drunkenness, even drug use in the United States is pretty common, but criminalized. Vagrancy and traffic violations, pretty regular things that are criminalized in the United States. A lot of these criminalizations were made to preserve social hierarchies. One of the most notable laws and group of laws to protect social hierarchies were the Jim Crow laws, which segregated people of color from whites in the United States. It can go in a positive direction, though, as we see with the Civil Rights Act, where rights were given to many groups of people in the United States. But immigration policies like the Chinese Exclusion Act and the quota system, which limited the number of people coming from certain countries and favored people coming from Eastern European countries, were all used to preserve social hierarchies. And what's important what's important to think about is the fact that these laws don't mean anything unless they are enforced by somebody. As I mentioned at the beginning, the United States didn't get police departments until the late 1800s. What's bad about the United States police system, though, is that there is no top-down regulation, meaning that police aren't often held accountable for their actions. And oftentimes, police in the United States have shown severe racial and socioeconomic biases. And as I mentioned previously, one of the main factors of mass incarceration was the war on drugs, started by the Nixon administration in the 70s. You guys can read through this quote, but basically, one of Nixon's assistants was quoted saying that they used these policies to directly target anti-war folks and the black populations in the United States. It was expanded by the Nixon administration, and the prison and jail populations tripled between 1980 and 1993 thanks to Nixon. 30 to 40% of those Americans that were arrested because of this were African Americans. Then we go on to the tough on crime policies, which basically were a group of policy reforms that increased the length of prison sentences and the severity of punishments for crimes. This not only added more people into the prison system, but added longer sentences, which kept them in the prison system for longer, which increased our prison population over time. And this also disproportionately affected African Americans in the United States. And the biggest issue with our mass incarceration system that we have currently is with the 13th Amendment. The 13th Amendment is supposed to get rid of slavery in the United States, but allowed slavery as a punishment for crimes. If you want to learn more